She thought she was just a waitress serving coffee to a quiet man with a nice car. But that man would change everything. In just a few months, he asked her to marry him. He picked the venue, the ring, even the dress. And inside that rented dress, she found a note that changed her life. She almost ignored it. Almost. But what she discovered after that call would shake her to the core. Avery had the kind of beauty that life had already tried to erase. Not the kind you see on magazine covers, but something quieter and softer. The kind that comes from surviving things no one else knows about. At 34, she worked 6 days a week at a roadside diner 2 hours outside the city. Her hair was always tied back, her hands always moving, and her smile always polite but never too long. She had learned over the years that the less you show the world, the less it takes from you. The diner was old, with chrome stools covered in peeling red vinyl and a jukebox that hadn't worked since 2009. But people came for the pancakes and for the comfort of something that never changed. Then one Wednesday morning, a black Bentley pulled up. It was shiny and too clean for that kind of road. Everyone noticed. People stopped eating, and the cook peeked out from behind the kitchen curtain. The man who stepped out didn't seem bothered by the attention. He wore a grey suit and a wool coat, even though it wasn't cold. He walked in, sat in the booth by the window, and opened a folded newspaper made of real paper. Avery walked over and asked if he wanted coffee, like she would ask anyone. He looked up, and for a second something unreadable passed through his eyes. He said yes and told her to make it however she usually did. When she said it was just coffee, he simply replied that it was fine. He came back the next week, and the next. Every Wednesday at 10 in the morning. He never flirted or talked about himself. Instead, he asked questions about her, where she grew up, what book she was reading, if she believed people could start over. Once he told her she didn't seem like someone who belonged there. Avery smiled and said she was thinking the same about him. He paused and said maybe they were both just waiting to belong somewhere else. 3 months passed, and then one night, he invited her to dinner, not at the diner. It started softly. Nathan began inviting Avery out after her shifts, never flashy, always seeming accidental. Like the night he just happened to be waiting outside the diner as she locked up, offering to walk her home since it was getting dark. He never pushed and was always polite and patient. In those early weeks, he asked the kind of questions that made Avery feel like someone was finally seeing her. He wanted to know what she had wanted to be when she was little, and what was something no one had ever asked her, but she wished they had. She told him about her mother's early death, about the brother she hadn't spoken to in years, and about a time when she dreamed of opening her own bakery with windows full of golden light and the smell of cinnamon. Nathan listened with quiet intensity, and when she talked, he never interrupted. He wasn't like the men she had known before, who were loud, impatient, and careless. He made her feel worthy, elevated, and special. After 2 months of weekly walks, quiet dinners, and conversations that felt more like confessions, he took her to a small rooftop restaurant she had never heard of. Everything was candlelight and white linen, and silence that felt intentional. She wore a second-hand dress she had only worn once before, and he wore a dark suit with no tie. The dessert arrived already plated with 2 slices of lemon cake, and between them sat a small black box. She stared at it, her heart pounding with disbelief more than excitement. Nathan leaned forward, his tone as soft as always. He told her she didn't belong in that diner, that she deserved a life where no one forgot her name, and asked her to let him take care of her. She didn't say yes immediately, but she didn't say no either. Deep down, Avery was tired of the struggle, of being overlooked, of fixing everything alone, tired of waiting for someone to see the whole of her and still want to stay. So she nodded, and when he placed the diamond ring on her finger, she noticed how beautiful it was. It was delicate, small, and almost too perfect, like everything else he touched. After she said yes, the world didn't change overnight, but her world did. Nathan moved Avery into his home a week later without discussion, just an elegant suggestion wrapped in concern. He said it was closer to the city, safer and warmer, and that she would feel more at peace there. The house was tucked behind high stone walls, invisible from the road. Inside it was beautiful but cold, with wide hallways, pale wood floors that never creaked, and glass doors that opened to a garden that seemed too perfect to be real. At first, she was in awe. She had never lived in a place where everything worked. There were no leaking taps, no flickering lights, and no smell of someone else's cooking from the apartment next door. But soon, the silence began to press against her skin. There were no personal touches in the house, no photos, no books, and not a single drawer that felt lived in. The kitchen looked like it belonged in a showroom, spotless and untouched. When she asked if she could bring her own mugs, Nathan gently said the ones they had were fine and suggested they keep things clean. He said it with a smile, and he always smiled, which somehow made it harder to argue. He insisted she stop working, saying she had spent enough of her life serving others, and now it was time for him to serve her. He meant it as a kindness, a gift, but soon her days became long and strangely quiet. She wasn't allowed to drive his car, and when she suggested getting a part-time job at a nearby bakery, he shook his head and asked why she would want to go back to that kind of life. He always said it like he was saving her, like the life she came from was something dirty he had washed off her skin. But Avery missed her routines, the diner, the rhythm, and the freedom. She started walking in the mornings, taking short loops around the estate, but even there she felt eyes on her, though she never saw anyone. One morning, she opened a cabinet in the upstairs hallway while looking for a blanket. Inside were boxes tied with ribbon and neatly labeled. When she opened one, she found a silk scarf, then a bottle of perfume that was half used, then earrings in a velvet pouch. All were beautiful and feminine, but unfamiliar. Each box held something different, but they all felt the same. They felt used, forgotten, and preserved. She told herself not to read into it, thinking maybe they were from his mother or a sister. Nathan had never spoken of his family or anything from before her. Another day she passed by the guest room that was always locked, but this time it wasn't. The door stood open, and inside, light filtered through gauzy curtains onto a room that looked untouched by time. There was a vanity with a silver brush set, a chair with an indent like someone had just stood up, and on the dresser a photograph in a silver frame. The photograph showed a woman who was elegant and pale with delicate features and dark hair tied back in a bun. She looked exactly like Avery. The resemblance was so strong that her breath caught. She stepped closer, studying the curve of the smile and the way the woman held herself, graceful and restrained. She didn't know what she was seeing or why it made her chest feel tight. As she reached out to touch the photo, Nathan's voice came from behind her, telling her that room was private. She jumped and turned to see him standing in the doorway, calm as ever. He said the woman was someone he had lost a long time ago. When Avery whispered an apology, he didn't answer, but just stepped forward and gently shut the door. That night, she couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and wondered if she had ever asked the right questions or if she had just been too tired to notice the answers. Weeks passed, and he became more distant, but also more controlling. He asked where she went, why she stayed out so long in the garden, and why she looked so tired. Once she caught him going through her drawer and reading her notebook. He didn't apologize, but simply said he just wanted to make sure she was okay. The control was always spoken with care, never anger, but it wrapped tighter around her ribs each day. One morning, he came into the room holding a white envelope and announced they were getting married. When Avery asked if they were, he said next month, and that he had made all the arrangements. He handed her the invitation, which was embossed with gold foil and addressed only to them. He explained it would be a private ceremony out in the country at a small chapel, quiet and beautiful, just how they liked it. But he meant how he liked it. There would be no guests, no witnesses, and no reception. Just the two of them and a man with a license. Avery felt something strange stir in her stomach, but she nodded and he smiled. A few days later, he brought home a garment bag and told her it was her dress. She didn't ask where it came from because she already knew. When she reached out to unzip it, he stopped her and said to let it be a surprise. She asked if he didn't want to know if it fit, and he stepped closer, kissed her forehead, and said it would. His tone left no room for questions. That night, while he was in the study, she took the dress out anyway. It was beautiful, yes, but it was old. The lace at the sleeves was yellowing slightly, and the satin had a softness that came only from years of wear. She ran her hand over the bodice, and it felt like someone else's memory. When she looked inside, she saw the tag had been cut out. There was no label, no size, just silk, bones, and silence. Something about it made her heart stutter. She hung it back up carefully as if it might bruise. The next morning she woke early and went into the closet again. She looked at the dress one more time, but this time something shifted when she lifted it. There was a soft fluttering sound. She reached into the side seam, felt around the lining, and her fingers closed around something. It was a piece of folded paper. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The ink was faded and the paper worn, but the words were still clear. "If you're scared too, call me. L." Avery sat on the floor of the closet with the dress pulled in her lap and read the note over and over again. The house around her was still, too still. She didn't know who Elle was or how long the note had been there, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't the first. The note stayed hidden in the bottom of Avery's dresser drawer, folded so many times the edges were beginning to tear. She read it each night when Nathan went to bed. The handwriting was elegant but rushed, a message written in fear. She hadn't called yet, but it haunted her. The weight of it, the quiet truth buried in 7 small words. Nathan changed. He didn't yell because he never did, but he began to track her. He asked where she had walked to when she was gone for almost an hour, why she didn't answer her phone that afternoon, and reminded her that leaving the window open wasn't safe. It was always spoken in a tone of concern, gentle and controlled, but it wrapped tighter around her chest each time. He started locking doors. The guest room with the photograph was locked again. So was the study, and so was the cabinet in the hall where the boxes were. She tried once, softly, to bring it up, telling him at breakfast that she felt a little trapped sometimes. Nathan put down his coffee and looked at her for a long time before saying the house was meant to protect her, and if she didn't feel safe, maybe the problem wasn't the house. She didn't speak after that. One night, she waited until Nathan was asleep, counted 20 breaths and crept downstairs. She dialed the number written at the bottom of the note, which had no area code, just 7 digits. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the ring, but someone answered. It was a woman and her voice cracked as she said hello. Avery couldn't speak at first. She clutched the receiver, her mouth dry, eyes fixed on the staircase in case Nathan stirred. The voice on the other end waited, then asked softly if she was wearing the dress. When Avery said she had tried it on, there was silence, and then the woman said it was almost time. That single sentence froze Avery to the bone. The woman introduced herself as Lena and said she had left the note and had been waiting for years, not knowing if anyone would ever find it. When Avery asked if she had been with Nathan, Lena said yes and explained that she was supposed to marry him just like Avery. He had picked the dress, the location, and the flowers, saying she was a woman with grace who looked like someone he had lost. Lena explained that the woman in the silver frame photo was Amelia, the original and Nathan's only legal wife who had died in that house. It was ruled an accident, a fall down the stairs with no autopsy and no investigation, but Lena knew what had happened because she had seen what he did to Amelia and to them. She had tried to leave once, but the gates wouldn't open, and the phone lines were dead. He had taken her ID and wallet, saying she was safer without them, always making it feel like love until you realized it was a cage. When Avery asked why the dress was so important, Lena explained that he kept it always because it had belonged to Amelia, her last memory sewn with lace. He found women who resembled her, quiet ones who were tired survivors, offered them peace, and then watched them disappear. Lena had escaped by running the night before the wedding through the woods with nothing, sleeping in a shed for 3 days until she found a road. She couldn't stop him, but she could warn the next one. When Avery asked why Lena hadn't gone to the police, she said they told her she was unstable and had fabricated it all. Nathan was a master of appearances with records, lawyers, and cameras in every corner, except the ones that mattered. She had stopped trying to prove anything, but never stopped waiting and hoping someone else would call. Avery felt tears rising, silent and hot, as she asked what happened after the wedding. After a long pause, Lena's voice turned to a whisper as she explained that you vanish. He isolates you further, makes you dependent, and then one day you trip, slip, and fall down the stairs, just like Amelia. No one would ever question it when they saw the dress, the photo, and the same smile. He erases you and then replaces you. The house was suddenly too quiet, and Avery's gaze darted to the clock showing 3:14 a.m. Lena said she could help, but Avery had to leave today before he did what he always did right before the wedding. When Avery asked what that was, Lena explained that he changed his will, made you the sole beneficiary, and then filed the death certificate. When Avery whispered that she wasn't dead, Lena said she would be, unless she left now. A creak from the stairs made Avery spin around with the phone clutched to her chest. There was silence, then the faint sound of footsteps receding. He had been listening. When Avery told Lena she thought he knew about the call, the voice on the other end trembled as she said not to wait for dawn but to run. Then the line went dead. Avery stood frozen in the darkness of the kitchen with the dress hanging upstairs like a noose. For the first time, she let herself feel it fully, not confusion or doubt, but fear, real, suffocating fear. Everything she had pushed aside was now screaming inside her. The boxes, the photos, the locket, the scarf with the initials AM. She crept back upstairs and peeked into Nathan's room. It was empty and the bed was perfectly made. Her heart thundered as she turned toward her own room slowly. The closet door was open. The dress was gone, and on the bed, placed gently across the pillow, was the veil. It was white, transparent, and still warm. She backed away, down the hall and down the stairs. She grabbed the spare key she had seen Nathan place inside a porcelain vase near the entrance months ago. After one last look at the house, the gallery of silence and shadows, she opened the front door and saw him. Nathan was standing in the driveway holding the dress, telling her it wasn't safe out there and to come back inside. She stared at him, and for the first time she said no. Avery didn't scream or cry. She simply turned and ran. Barefoot down the gravel drive with moonlight painting silver across her shoulders, the wind caught her robe as she reached the gate, praying and begging with her heart thundering. It was open and unlatched, as if Lena had somehow silently left it that way. Behind her, Nathan didn't chase, not with footsteps, but she could feel his presence, that chilling stillness that clung to his every word, the way he watched, measured, and waited. She didn't stop running until the house disappeared behind the trees. Branches scratched her arms and stones cut her feet, but she didn't care. Somewhere between fear and instinct, she found a narrow road, an old highway empty, except for the occasional hum of distant trucks. She flagged one down, and the driver, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes, pulled over without asking questions. Avery climbed in, shaking and silent. She didn't say where she was going, only that she needed to leave everything behind. The woman nodded and said she was going in the right direction. Hours passed and she watched the world change through the window. Cities turned into towns, towns into hills, then coastlines. She didn't speak to anyone, not yet, but she felt something shift inside her, something quiet and good and unfamiliar. It was freedom, not loud or cinematic, just the absence of control and fear. Weeks later, Avery found a small apartment above a bookstore. The owner, an old man named Elias, let her stay the first month for free, saying he liked the way she didn't say much, because it meant she had lived. She worked in the shop during the day, stacking hardcovers and dusting poetry collections. At night, she sat by the window with a cup of tea and watched the sea. She never spoke Nathan's name again because she didn't need to. Some stories, she had learned, don't need to be retold to be overcome. They just need to end. One morning, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a small envelope and a photograph of Lena standing on a cliffside with her hair wild in the wind and arms outstretched. On the back, written in the same handwriting as the note in the dress, it said, "I finally found a place where no one calls me her. I hope you do too. Lena." Avery smiled, folded the photo carefully, and placed it inside her journal. That afternoon, she took a walk along the water with no plan, no ring, and no man waiting with a suit, and a smile too smooth to be real. Just the breeze, her feet, and her story. Hers. In that quiet, Avery whispered, not to anyone else but to herself, "I wasn't saved. I saved me." Months later, a girl walked into the bookstore. She was young and nervous, carrying a wedding magazine under one arm and uncertainty in her eyes. Avery saw it right away. The pause before each sentence, the way she avoided her reflection in the glass, and the quiet shake in her hands. They talked for a while about books, love, and silence. Before she left, the girl said she didn't know why she was so scared, and that he said it was just cold feet. Avery smiled softly and said that sometimes fear isn't a warning, sometimes it's a map. The girl looked at her for a long moment and then left without buying the magazine. That evening, Avery took out her journal and opened to the page where Lena's photo was tucked. Then, carefully, she placed something new beside it. It was a small note, folded once. Inside, written in her own handwriting, it said, "If you're scared too, call me." She slipped it into the pocket of a wedding dress hanging at the back of the bookstore's donation rack. Because some dresses carry stories, but some carry warnings. Sometimes, the greatest love story is the one where you finally choose yourself.